Hello folks, I'm Alex, this is Alex Unabridged, and this is my wrap up for March. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, time to talk about what I got through in March. Didn't get through quite as much as I'd hoped to in March for various reasons. A little bit slumpy and just quite busy, and I also went off-piste a little bit on my TBR, the reason for which will become evident in a minute. Still got through 9 books though, so I'm going to fire through these quite quickly so that I don't keep you here forever. So let's get straight into it then. First up, this is in chronological order, by the way, the order in which I read stuff. First up, we've got Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. This was a buddy read with Nick from another booktube channel. And wow, yeah, this was quite the book to start the month with. This is a sledgehammer of a book. This is a trans horror novel, sort of a haunted house novel that deals with transphobia and generally sort of fascism in Britain today. It's a very interesting book, but it is by no means subtle at all. It's very overt. I'm really glad that I read this with Nick, actually. I don't know whether I'd have made it all the way through this on my own because of some of the trans stuff in it. It was very, very difficult to read for me. It's, as I say, it's a very interesting book. It's a very well written book. It's got some really interesting characters in it, none of which are particularly likable, but it's the characters' sort of backgrounds, evolution, thinking, arcs, that kind of thing, that's really fascinating in this, how they behave towards one another, and the dynamics in it are really, really interesting. The haunted house stuff is excellent when you get to that. That's some of the best haunted house stuff I think I've read. And the writing's not necessarily my cup of tea. It's got that kind of modern horror style to it, which you see with quite a few sort of contemporary horror authors. You know, sort of somebody like Eric LaRocca has got a particular kind of contemporary horror style. I like his stuff, or what I've read of his stuff. This one, elements of it I really did, and some I really didn't. It kind of went off on one a little bit on the style at certain points, and it wasn't necessarily for me, but it was still well written. It's just, you know, a subjective, not necessarily my cup of tea. The plot and the way that the haunted house was kind of what happened in that house, which you're never quite sure about until sort of you get towards the end of the book, that was, yeah, really well worked into the kind of more real world character relationships and sort of finding out, you know, what's happened after the events of the haunted house. This is kind of largely set after an event that happened in this house, and it's the characters dealing with the fallout of that. I can't say I enjoyed reading it though. I enjoyed the reading experience of a buddy read with Nick. That was excellent. So I enjoyed that, but not necessarily, I can't say I enjoyed the book. I appreciated the book, but not necessarily enjoyed it. So a rating for this one then, I'll pop the full rating up on screen just so you can see my breakdown. But I gave this a 7.5 out of 10 when it was rounded down. And this is a 3.5 star on Storygraph. It is a good book. I would recommend this. It's not, I don't think it's necessarily what you'd call extreme horror, although there are some very extreme sections in it. It's not nice to read, but it shouldn't be. And I would, I would recommend it for sure, but just with the caveat that certainly if you are trans or non-binary or, you know, kind of genderqueer, it could be a bit of a trigger. You know, it certainly was very difficult for me coming from that side of things. But still very much worthwhile reading. Absolutely, I'm glad I've read it, and I probably will tackle Alison Runfit's second book, Brainworms, at some point, but I need a good break after this one before I go back into that kind of stuff. So then, after I finished that, this is why I went off-piste from my TBR, because after that I just needed something completely the other end of the spectrum. I needed something, you know, sex positive, gender affirming, lovely hug of a book in a wonderfully almost utopic world. And so I picked this off the shelf, which I'd had since Christmas, and that is A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. And this is the second in the Monk and Robot series. And I just wanted to go back and spend some more time with Sibling Dex and Moscap the Robot. And I got exactly what I wanted from this. It did not disappoint at all. I absolutely loved the first one, A Psalm for the Wild Built. That was my #1 book of the year last year. And yeah, this one is just as good. I can't decide whether I like it better or not, but it's certainly just as good for me. And it does leave it in a position where there could be more. I'm hoping there's more. I'm really hoping there's more, because I love these characters. I love this world. It's, you know, its atmosphere is just so warm and inviting. The writing is, you know, it's very down to earth writing. It's not difficult at all to comprehend. It's very conversational in some respects. It's just a big warm hug of a book. I really enjoy the philosophy that Chambers works into her writing, because it's, you know, there is plenty of stuff to think about, and she does ask some pretty big questions, but it's done in a way that just kind of like eases you in, and just you find yourself asking these questions. It doesn't kind of baffle you with its philosophy. It just invites you to think about things, and muse about things in a very nice way. So I loved this. I really thoroughly enjoyed the reading experience of this, and it was exactly what I needed after the you know, slightly traumatic experience of reading Tell Me I'm Worthless. So for this one, again, I'll put the rating up on screen so you can see the breakdown. But this came out at a 9 out of 10 and a 5-star read, unsurprisingly so, I think. Hush, Dee. Hush now. Have you finished? You don't know? Got more to say? So, moving on, we get to the first book, which is for my science fiction for the somewhat hesitant reading, and that was The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. I got a full video out already for this, my full thoughts on it. If you want to check that out, I will link to that in the description. But yeah, this was a mixed bag. This is a book of short stories, some extremely short, basically microfiction short, and some a little bit longer. And they'd all been published separately elsewhere, and then were brought together in this kind of, you know, pieced together novel, essentially, which looks at, you know, the first human explorers to land on Mars, and the hostile welcome that they get from the indigenous Martians, through the kind of the settling of Mars, society growing on Mars, you know, over a period of several years. And it's, yeah, as I say, it's a mixed bag. Some stories weren't my cup of tea at all. Certainly some of the ones that kind of edged into science fantasy, which is quite typical of the time, apparently, but that's not necessarily my cup of tea. And then a couple of short stories, certainly later on in the collection, which I absolutely loved and have become some of my favourites. Certainly one, There Will Come Soft Rains, I think is probably going to be pretty high up on my kind of list of favourites short stories of any genre from any author, anywhere, anytime. You know, one of those. So definitely a real mixed bag on it. But still a really interesting read to read, you know, keep reading some golden age science fiction stuff. It's very interesting to see, you know, how it's influenced what's come after. And Ray Bradbury's writing style, even if I don't necessarily like the content or the plot or what have you, or the character work isn't amazing in this, but it's not about that. Ray Bradbury's writing style I really get on with. I do really like his word choice, his rhythm, his, you know, kind of use of language. So still an interesting and enjoyable read on the whole. So I'll pop the rating up from that on screen, but this one came out at a 6 out of 10. And that's gone on Storygraph as a 3-star read. Okay, next up then, it was the turn of the Magic Toyshop by Angela Carter. This was one of 2 Angela Carters that I read in March as part of my Month With project, where I'm reading some more stuff from authors that I've only read a tiny little bit of to try and, you know, see how much I really like their work. So the Magic Toyshop was the first one. This was an audiobook read by Fiona Shaw. This was good. I enjoyed this. It was not what I expected though. I kind of, from what I'd read of Angela Carter, I was expecting like full-on magic realism, and the magic realism in this is subtle at best, I would say. It's still, I've looked around and it's described as magic realism, but I've struggled to see that, to be honest, in it. It's a strange book. It's, you know, it's got some odd characters in it, and there's a certain eeriness and as I say, like strangeness, etherealness about it. But it still feels, it's certainly not the kind of levels of magic realism that say something like Knights of the Circus is, which is one of the ones I'd read before. But Carter's writing is still phenomenal. This was an earlier book than Knights of the Circus. This was 1967 versus sort of 1980s, I think Knights of the Circus was. And so you can see that it's, you know, earlier work. But yeah, Carter's writing is still absolutely brilliant, especially when it comes to the character work. This is character focused. This is a coming of age story. You know, it's about a 15-year-old girl, Melanie, who loses her parents and has to go and live with a very oppressive, abusive uncle in London, and his family, his wife and her 2 brothers, and he owns a strange toy shop, and it's a very strange household, and it's about Melanie coming to terms with the death of her parents and having to like forge a new life and find where she fits in this new family, this very strange new family. And the character work is still very, very good. Wasn't maybe my cup of tea in terms of the plot so much, and the tone is quite melancholy, certainly for the sort of latter 3/4 of the book. But it was still an enjoyable experience, largely down to the quality of Carter's writing. It's such wonderful prose. It's not overly purple prose, but it's got a poetry to it, and just her imagery, the way she kind of conjures up character, particularly in terms of what characters look like, their personalities, the analogies that she uses, things like that. It's brilliant. Her writing is brilliant. So again, I'll pop the rating up on the screen for you. But overall, this one came out at a 7.5 out of 10 and has gone on Storygraph as a 3.5 star. I do have a wrap up for both Angela Carter books out already. So I'll link to that in the description if you want to check out some slightly more in-depth thoughts on that. Next up then, another audiobook, and the second of my science fiction reading for the month, and that was Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. So giant carnivorous plants causing trouble, but that's not the biggest threat in Wyndham's post-apocalyptic world. This follows a young man who wakes up in hospital one day with his eyes bandaged, and removes the bandages, finds out that he can see, but everything is around him is quiet. He's in a London hospital, and as he explores the new world, he realizes that pretty much everybody, not quite everybody, but the vast majority of people have gone blind after looking at this strange comet that appeared in the sky the night before. And so it's a look at, you know, how a society might quite quickly devolve, collapse, when the majority of people are suddenly rendered blind, and what happens to those who are left with sight as well. And as I say, you've got this this background threat of these Triffids, these carnivorous mobile plants. I've got a full review out for that. I'll link to that one in the description, of course, as well. But yeah, I loved this. Really enjoyed the character. The main character particularly was extremely well developed. It's told from his perspective, and you really get in his head. You really do get into his head, and you get to know kind of about other characters through his kind of retelling of their stories as well. It's kind of a second-hand account, but you know, you get a good idea of character from him. Plenty full of ideas, you know, great writing, humorous, evocative, again melancholic writing, eerie, really great at evoking different sort of tones throughout, and an absolutely brilliant atmosphere to this one. London in this situation, this apocalyptic situation, was so easy to imagine, thanks to Wyndham's writing. Yeah, really loved the atmosphere, extremely vivid in my imagination, I think. So yeah, pop the rating up on screen for that, so you can see the breakdown. But yeah, 9 out of 10 and a 5-star read. Okay, next up then, we're into a bit of modern horror, and that was with From Below by Darcy Coates. This is the story of a group of divers making a documentary about a shipwreck, a wreck that has been found, and they have been given permission to go and dive down to it and you know, look at what's left, basically. And when they get down there, they find that there's something that doesn't want them to leave, still inhabiting the ship. I really enjoyed this. Yeah, this was a recommendation I saw on Nick's channel, another booktube channel, and I do like a bit of deep sea horror, because the water in the deep ocean scares the crap out of me, generally. And so I thought, yes, when I saw this one, I thought I'm gonna have to give this a go, and finally got around to it. Yeah, the atmosphere on this is brilliant. It's really claustrophobic. It's chilling. There are a couple of scenes that were like you know, legitimately kind of made me shiver, that were really kind of tense. It's definitely got that kind of cliffhanger at the end of every chapter thing going on, which kind of made me want to read more of it. It was well done in that respect, in terms of it was compelling, definitely. Characters weren't bad. It's not character focused. It's very much, I think, plot focused. But the characters, you know, they were decent, and you know, interesting, and there was a decent variety of them. Main character was good. Main sort of female lead, and yeah, the writing was decent. It wasn't anything spectacular in terms of the prose or anything like that, but it served its purpose very well. There was a bit of repetition. That's the only thing I'd say with it, is that like there was a lot of repetitive descriptions of and a slight obsession with like how somebody's mouth felt, like dryness of mouth or sticky tongue or things like that, you know, taste and stuff like that. And it got a bit repetitive. People are constantly licking their dry lips, things like that. There was just a bit, maybe too much of that. But yeah, it was it was still, it was, you know, that just kind of made me smile a little bit. It wasn't distracting. It was just something that I noted that it was maybe a little bit repetitive. But as I say, it didn't spoil it by any means. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was a great fun read. I would read this again. And yeah, I'd recommend this definitely if you like a bit of kind of creepy, sort of haunted house, haunted ship, underwater, claustrophobic horror. But yeah, I'll put the full ratings up on screen, but I gave this a 7.5 out of 10 and a 3.5 stars on Storygraph. Okay then, next up was my other buddy read for the month, and a bit of non-fiction now with Ancestors. I've got more thoughts about this in my Historathon Wrap Up, which I'll link to below. But yeah, I really liked this. I had this on audiobook, which wasn't necessarily the best way for me to access it. I think in the future I'll try non-fiction, certainly non-fiction history, non-fiction science, as a physical or an ebook. I think audiobooks, I can't retain the information very easily when it's an audiobook. But I buddy read this with Debs from Raina Read Stuff. Another great buddy read experience. That's my first two first two buddy read experiences were both in March, and they've both been fantastic. So I'm very much looking forward to more that I've got coming up. But yeah, this was really good, and chatting about it with Debs afterwards on video call really kind of helped me kind of solidify some of the information in my mind. But yeah. This one was a prehistory of Britain, looking, you know, through 7 different burial sites, and it covered a lot of stuff that I'd kind of heard of before from the UK. Some sites that I've visited before, some that I haven't, that I now want to visit, and that was the good thing about it, is it did make me kind of want to go and visit some of the places that Alice Roberts talks about in this. I really liked some of Alice Roberts' social commentary. Really interesting take on stuff, really accessible generally in terms of her writing style. Alice Roberts is great on TV, and it's very similar to how she kind of speaks on TV. So yeah, really good, really enjoyable read for Historathon. Rating it up on screen, but I gave this an overall 8 out of 10 and a 4-star read on Storygraph. Okay, next one is back to some more Angela Carter for Wise Children this time. This is essentially a memoir of the one of the main characters, or the main character, Dora Chance, who is one of a set of twins, Dora and Nora, and I think it's their 75th birthday, but it's on the eve of their father's 100th birthday. That this is told, and it's basically a family history, or Nora and Dora's history, from being little kids and the family before that, her mother and father and stuff like that, because they are illegitimate. Essentially, they are never recognised by their father's family, and so they have quite a strange kind of relationship with that side of the family, but they are that both their father's family and them are theatre people. They grow up as music hall performers, basically. And so it's a very theatrical, very out there, very entertaining, but also very moving piece that is very, very much a celebration of life. Again, more information about this one in my wrap up for my month with Angela Carter, which I'll link to in the description. But yeah, I loved this one. This one kind of really lived up to my expectations, I think. I'll put the rating up on screen, but this one came out at a 9 out of 10, and it's a 5-star read on Storygraph. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and I will definitely listen to this again. This was an audiobook narrated by Tracy Ullman, who did a cracking job with it, especially with the kind of the South London accent and humour. Yeah, really, really good. And then finally, the last book that I finished in March was The Terror, which was my first quarter's pick for my quarterly chunk project. So I'd been reading this through January and February as well, but finished it up in March. And again, I've got another video out already looking at that as a full review. But yeah, really enjoyed this one. Cracking bit of historical fiction with some sort of horror elements blended into it. Really great atmosphere, and again, really good character work. You know, you've got like 940 pages basically to really explore some of the characters in this, character dynamics in this, and it worked really well. Again, the atmosphere was absolutely brilliant. Again, I think my favourite thing about the book, the sense of isolation and desolation and threat that comes from the Arctic setting of this, Arctic in the winter in the 19th century on a ship, you know, and all the things that come with that, and the lack of kind of, you know, medical treatment techniques, etc., that you get with the time as well. And a really interesting introduction to Dan Simmons and Dan Simmons' writing style, which I really enjoyed, despite its like slight overwordiness sometimes. But yeah, really enjoyed this, and really enjoyed the experience of reading this over 3 months. It was a great winter read because it was super cold, and yeah, just the kind of lengthy isolation that the characters experience as they're trapped in the ice in the Arctic. That was really good to kind of read that over 3 months. It's kind of, you're following that kind of sort of trudge through it, if you like. Not that it was a trudge to read at all. It was very good and highly compelling. But it just felt right to read it over this length of time. So yeah, rating up on screen for that one. But that one came out as an 8.5 out of 10, and I've given that a 4-star read as well. So that is it for March. Those are my 9 books. So I did pretty well. I got through 9 books. But yeah, I just didn't hit all of my TBR books. So those will go back on the shelf, and I will come back to those at some stage. In terms of my Read What You Own challenge, I am down now to, I think, 15 books left on my challenge, which I'm hoping to be able to get through in April and May. And then my Read What You Own challenge will be done. But it is my birthday on Tuesday, and I already know that I'm getting some book vouchers. So I will be having a haul, a birthday haul, which I'll be doing a video on, obviously, probably next weekend. But I'm going to try and resist reading any of those until the Read What You Own challenge is done. I've done pretty well with the ones that I bought at Christmas. I've not dipped into many of those at all. So yeah, I just need to crack on, get this challenge done, and then I can properly read some of the stuff that I brought into the house recently. But I've not gone and spent, you know, randomly my own money. I've not done that at all. So I am still doing all right. I'm within my own rules for the challenge. But yeah, I want to get it wrapped up now so that I can kind of crack on with reading some of the other stuff. So there we go. Yes, that was March for me. April is a big month full of events. My TBR and Pile of Possibilities is out for that if you want to check that out. But yeah, it's going to hopefully get through quite a bit more in April. So that will do from me today anyway. Thank you very much for watching, folks. As always, do let me know in the comments if you've read any of the books I've talked about today and what you thought, or if there's anything you're going to pick up based on my thoughts around them. I will be back on Tuesday with a tag video, so I hope you'll join me for that then. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.